Haribol, Jayam Vishnu Paramahansa, Parivajikasatar, Sata Shishima Jagaku, Sudasurupananda, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Paramahansa, Parivajikasatar, Sata Shishima, Ishavangre, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Jagannatha Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Haribol. So thank you for inviting me here to Congregational KIRTAN and giving me the opportunity to speak on the glories of Lord Jagannatha. Really appreciate it. I mean, Lord Jagannatha is just so wonderful. You know, his manifestation in this world. And Jagannath Puri is like a city of like varying numbers. I've read 130,000, 180,000. But the whole city completely revolves around the worship of Lord Jagannatha. Lord Jagannatha is the center of everything. And there's you know, different communities within Jagannath Puri that have particular services to Lord Jagannatha. You know, there's the cooks, there's the cleaners, there's dancers, there's the people who carve build the Ratha Yatra carts. There's those who go and find the particular logs in the forest. You know, the priests have dreams and it's revealed to them where the particular tree will be. Every 12 years, Lord Jagannatha receives, Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra receive a new body. So this is revealed to them in dreams where the particular tree is, and they go and find the trees. And you know, particular people cut the trees down, bring the trees back, and particular people carve the deity forms. So this goes on for generations after generations. You know, all the way back to those who assisted Indradyumna, Maharaj Indradyumna, in the first original worship of Lord Jagannath from time immemorial. I mean, they trace back the particular Jagannath temple structure now, historically at least 1,200 years, but it goes back thousands of years. You know, so Jagannath Puri is one of the most famous pilgrimage places throughout India. India, of course, is a place of pilgrimage places. Everywhere you go in India, there's different pilgrimage sites. But Jagannath Puri, along with Vrindavan Dham and Navadvitam, these are the three principal places of pilgrimage for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And you know, for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, you know, the importance of Jagannath Puri is equally there with Vrindavan Dham and Navadvitam, Mayapur, Shri Dham, Mayapur Dham. You know, Lord Chaitanya, after taking sannyas, you know, his mother asked that he reside in Jagannath Puri, which is about 300 miles or so away from Navadvip, so that she would be able to get news of him. If he went to Vrindavan Dham, then she would not hear from him. So Lord Chaitanya agreed to reside in Jagannath Puri. And Lord Chaitanya, you know, spent the final 18 years of his time on this planet in Jagannath Puri and performed many wonderful pastimes there. And we'll read and discuss some of his pastimes with Lord Jagannath a little bit. But from not only Lord Chaitanya has demonstrated the importance of Jagannath Puri, but also Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our great Parama Guru, whose disappearance day was just a few days ago. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur almost single-handedly resurrected the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which had come to be corrupted by various apasampradayas, or different distortions or misinterpretations of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur virtually single-handedly returned Gaudiya Vaishnavism to the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and wrote many books, and established different Sankirtan programs to re-establish the chanting of the holy names of Lord Chaitanya. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he spent time, a number of years, in Jagannath Puri as the deputy magistrate. And so a deputy magistrate, this is working for the British Raj, so almost one of the highest positions that an Indian-born person could attain, because the British civil servant, of course, retained all the top positions for Britishers, generally from England. But they were very much happy to have Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jagannath Puri, because the worship of Lord Jagannath is a very sensitive topic. And so actually, prior to the Indian Mutiny, or what the Indians tend to call now the First War of Independence, they the British were very much in a missionary frame of mind of trying to convert Hindus into Christianity and forcing Christian beliefs onto the different residents of India. And after the Indian Mutiny, the British had a bit of a change of heart and decided they'd better just let the Hindus be. And so they were very happy to have Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur be there and oversee the affairs of the Jagannath Temple. And he made various reforms there. And of course, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his very famous son, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, was born in Jagannath Puri. And he was born with his umbilical cord over his shoulder, as in the way of a Brahmana thread or an Upavita. This was considered very auspicious. But shortly after his birth, the Ratha Yatra was taking place, going down the Grand Road, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house was on this road. And so when the Ratha Yatra carts came by, they stopped, and nobody could move them. This was an unscheduled stop. And so anyway, after a while, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's wife, what's his name? I know, but I'm not remembering right now. Anyway, his wife, Srimati Bhagavati Devi, she brought out this newborn child, Vimala Prasad, which was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's birth name, brought him out, and from Lord Jagannath fell one of his garlands, and then this was placed around the neck of the newborn child. So then after that, the Ratha Yatra carts moved on, and so this was very much seen as a blessing of Lord Jagannatha, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had almost despaired of how difficult the task was to establish the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And he prayed for a ray of Vishnu to appear to help him. And this, so Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is sometimes described as a ray of Vishnu who appeared to assist Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is also sometimes described as the seventh Goswami. Of course, there is the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, Srila Rupa, Sri Sanatana, and so on. And they were very prolific authors, in particular, Srila Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami. They were hugely prolific authors, Balabhadra Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami as well, Raghunath Das Goswami. Very prolific authors. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was honored with the description of being the seventh Goswami due to his prolific writings. So coming after Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And as a young boy, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada used to have his own little Ratha Yatra in Calcutta. And there's actually a video of him. Who knows how they got the video? Anyway, there's actually a video of him pulling his small Ratha Yatra cart down the street in his neighborhood, and he got all the neighborhood children to join in with him. And Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, he'd always wanted to go to Jagannath Puri, but he'd never had the opportunity until he was much older. And so when he finally took Vanaprastha, leaving home, his first destination he went to was Jagannath Puri. And when he was in the West, he first went to, in 1965, to New York. The next place in America he went to was San Francisco. And some of his disciples there, one of his disciples, female disciple, had been in an import store. And she came back and she showed Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami this little form of Jagannatha that she'd found in this import store. And Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada paid his obeisances and explained that this was Lord Jagannatha. And then he had one of his disciples, Shama Sundardas, carve, very carefully using the dimensions of this little Jagannatha that they had found in the store, and actually sent his disciple back to the store, and they found also there was Baladeva and Subhadra. So they brought back Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra, and then they carved deities of them, much larger. And then Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada started Ratha Yatra, first Ratha Yatra in the West, being held in San Francisco. And one of his disciples, who was a dear friend of our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, was the main person in starting this Ratha Yatra. And he took the Ratha Yatra all throughout the Western world. And so even today, we know of the Ratha Yatra. So Ratha Yatra and Jagannath Puri, has great importance to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So Purushottam Kshetra or Jagannath Puri, it's a very important holy dham, and it's in the shape of a shankha or a conch. And Jagannath Puri, Purushottam dham, it's an eternally existing holy dham. Even at the time of devastation, Purushottam Kshetra continues to exist. And it's anyone who dies there actually achieves liberation. And it's very different from other, like the worship in the Jagannath temple is very different from worship in other Hindu temples. Like in Hindu temples, it's very caste conscious. All the worship is done by Brahmanas, all the cooking is done by Brahmanas, and so on. But in Jagannath Puri, it's very much more informal. much more informally done, with all these different castes having different functions at the Jagannath temple. And even everyone can eat prasad from the same plate. Even it said Brahma can eat the Jagannath prasadam from the mouth of a dog. So like this is like, totally radical throughout India with this great caste consciousness. Actually, just as an aside, Lord Chaitanya is seen, of course, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we see Lord Chaitanya in a particular way. But from a social perspective, in the way that he's often viewed within Bengal itself, is that Lord Chaitanya was like a social revolutionary. For example, his accepting Srila Haridas Thakur as the Acharya of the Holy Name. Srila Haridas Thakur is born in a Muslim family. And so, of course, to give him the position of being the Namacharya, the Acharya of the Holy Name, is like, absolutely radical. And to say that anyone can be an Acharya and that a Vaishnava is more elevated than a Brahmana. And it didn't matter if one was born as an outcast. One can chant the holy names of Krishna. One can become a spiritual master, a guru. So this was completely revolutionary. And so this is just one aspect of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and his importance even on a social level. Anyway, that was a little bit of an aside. But Ramanuja Acharya, prominent Acharya in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya around the 12th century, he came to Jagannath Puri, and he spoke to the king there, and he wanted to implement all kinds of changes in the worship of Lord Jagannatha. He wanted to institute the very sort of like South Indian Brahmins, very diligent in their deity worship, and everything is very precise and well done in accordance with the Vedic injunctions. And in fact, even Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada actually sent some of his disciples to study under South Indian Brahmins to learn deity worship because they're so meticulous in it. But anyway, so Ramanuja Acharya, he comes to Jagannath Puri and he wanted to make big changes to the method of worshipping Lord Jagannath. And so this worship of Lord Jagannath had been going on for, centuries, if not millenniums, in the way that Lord Jagannath had established it. And so anyway, Ramanuja Acharya, he convinced the king to go along with all these changes. And all these changes were going to be implemented. And on the morning that they were to be implemented, Ramanuja Acharya could not be found. And, the worship of Jagannath was, set to begin. So the king told the temple priest to, continue the worship in the normal way. And, it turned out that Ramanuja Acharya had a dream that night where Lord Jagannath had appeared to him. And it said to him, "Who are you to change the method of my worship? I'm very happy with the way I'm being worshipped." And then he actually physically transported Ramanuja Acharya from Jagannath Puri to 1,000 miles away somewhere in South India, so that he wouldn't interfere with the process of worship that Lord Jagannath very much appreciated. And so anyway, there's a very interesting story. It's not a story. A very interesting pastime about the Jagannath Prasad. And I'll read a little bit of it, of this pastime. This is described in the in the Chaitanya Mangala, which Lord Chandas Thakur. And so Narada Muni once went to Vaikuntha and served Mother Lakshmi very attentively. And Sri Lakshmi was very pleased and requested Narada Muni to ask for any boon. Narada Muni replied, "My dear Mother Lakshmi, you must promise that whatever I ask for, you will grant." Lakshmi Devi vowed that she would gladly fulfill his desire. The great saint revealed his wish. Narada Muni requested Lakshmi Devi to give him the Mahaprasad remnants of Lord Narayana. Suddenly, Lakshmi Devi's mood changed and her face became clenched with worry. "Please ask me for anything else except for the Lord's prasad," she begged. "You know, a few days ago, the Lord instructed me not to give his prasad to anyone. You must understand, I cannot disobey my husband's order." So anyway, Lakshmi went to Lord Narayana and asked him to allow her to give some prasadam to Narada Muni, which he agreed. So then she gave some. She gave this prasadam to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni was overcome with ecstasy and danced and sang with great joy and traveled throughout the universe, so happy. And he then went to where Lord Shiva resides, Kailasa, and they're brothers, of course, Shiva and Narada Muni. And so Lord Shiva asked Narada Muni, "Why are you so happy? What's going on?" So Narada Muni explains that he's had the Mahaprasadam and he's so joyous about it. And then Lord Shiva asked, "Well, have you got some for me?" And Narada Muni's like, he's like, "Oh, no, I don't. I was unable to save any," and then he noticed he had some stuck on his finger under his fingernail. So then he held out his finger and put his finger into Lord Shiva's mouth, and Lord Shiva ate the little remnant of Mahaprasad that was stuck on Narada Muni's finger. And Lord Shiva then became like totally ecstatic, absolutely enthused by receiving this Mahaprasad of Lord Narayana. And he then began to dance, and he danced so enthusiastically that his dancing resembled that of the dancing at the time of the annihilation of the universe. And he went on dancing, and this caused a great disturbance in the universe. So the different demigods, approached Mother Parvati and asked her to come to Lord Shiva and ask him to stop. So Mother Parvati then goes to Lord Shiva and says, "What's going on?" And he says, "Oh, well, Narada Muni gave me some Mahaprasadam of Lord Narayana, and it's like I'm just feeling so much ecstasy. I've just been dancing and dancing." So then Mother Parvati asked, "Well, have you got some for me?" So this, of course, created a very difficult situation for Lord Shiva, because, of course, he didn't have any. He had a speck that Narada Muni had put within his mouth. And so anyway, so then "My dear husband, what happened to you? What has caused you to dance in such ecstasy?" Lord Shiva explained that he had received Lord Narayana's Mahaprasad from Narada Muni. Parvati Devi became astonished. "My dear husband, have you kept any Mahaprasad for me?" Lord Shiva could not answer. He had managed to get only one morsel of prasad from Narada. How could he have saved any? Parvati was angry that she did not get any Mahaprasad. I am deprived of Lord Narayana's prasad. She was so furious that the fire of her anger started to burn the whole universe. From the lower planets to the higher planets, everyone felt the burning heat. The sages and saints understood that everything was going to be finished by the hot anger of Mother Parvati. No one could pacify her. Finally, all of the demigods headed by Lord Brahma rushed to Vaikuntha and to inform Lord Vishnu. Hearing the situation, Lord Vishnu traveled to Kailash, riding on the back of Garuda. As soon as Parvati Devi saw Lord Narayana, she came forward to offer her obeisances. Lord Narayana blessed her as his devotee and told her, I will give you as much Mahaprasad as you want. Please be pacified and give up your anger. Otherwise, all of your children will be finished. But Mother Parvati protested, I will not be satisfied if you give your Mahaprasad only to me. I request you to give your Mahaprasad to all of my children, to all of the living entities. I do not want to see any of my children suffer like I am suffering now due to being deprived of your Mahaprasad. You must arrange something so that all living entities, including the dogs, may honor your Mahaprasad. Lord Narayana smiled and said, Tatastu, let it be so. My dear Parvati, to fulfill your desire, I will appear in Nilachala Dham. This is Jagannath Puri. My temple will be famous for distributing my prasad. Whoever takes my prasad will be liberated. All of my prasad will be offered to you first. Then only will the remnants become Mahaprasad. This Mahaprasad will be distributed to everyone without consideration. I will keep you next to me. You will have your temple just behind mine in the inner courtyard. Lord Shiva, because he neglected to give you Mahaprasad, will stay at a distance. He will have his temple outside the courtyard. The Lord appeared in Puri as Jagannath. Parvati Devi is there in the name of Bimala. All of Jagannath's prasad is offered first to Bimala Devi. Then only is it distributed as Mahaprasad. In Puri, there is no distinction between low and high castes for taking Jagannath Mahaprasad. Jagannath Mahaprasad is so pure that Shastra says that a Brahmana can take Mahaprasad from the mouth of a dog. It can never be contaminated. So this is a wonderful story of why there is so much Mahaprasadam at Jagannath Puri. So much prasadam is distributed there and prepared to Lord Jagannath. Multiple offerings throughout the day. I think something like 56 different bhoga offerings are offered to Lord Jagannath throughout the day. And then this is all taken and offered to Bimala, Goddess Parvati, who has her place of worship, her small temple, in the courtyard of Jagannath's temple. And Lord Shiva, he's not allowed in the courtyard. So there's definitely a moral to the story here from the married couples about ensuring that if you receive something nice, that you give some to your wife. Otherwise, there will be a fiery situation, no doubt. So then all the prasadam is offered to Mother Bimala, and then it is distributed. And so this is why there's so much prasadam in Jagannath Puri. So, so I want to speak just a moment about the appearance of Lord Jagannath. We're probably all familiar of the pastime or the story of Lord Jagannath's appearance, the story of King Indradyumna. And, he was shown different trees that were to be, Lord Jagannatha is known as Daru Brahma. This is Brahma, or Parabrahman, Krishna, the Supreme Brahman, appearing in the form of Daru, or wood. And so Indradyumna was the first to have deities of Lord Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra carved. And these explanation of the story in the Puranas is that Krishna, in the form of, appeared disguised as the Vishvakarma, the great architect in the heavenly planets. He came disguised as an old carpenter, and he was going to carve the deities of Jagannath, but he said that he was not to be disturbed, to lock him in this room for 21 days and don't be disturbed, don't disturb me no matter what. So after the 14th day, King Indradyumna's wife, they couldn't hear any sound within the room where the carving was being done. They could no longer hear anything. And so she was like, oh, he must have died, he hasn't eaten anything. And then sort of, as wives can do, sort of pressured her husband to open the doors and see what's going on. And so, Vishvakarma had told King Indradyumna, don't disturb me. If you disturb me, then I'll stop. And so they go in, and there's these forms of what appear to be unfinished deities of Lord Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra. And so this pastime of this story tends to then give people the idea that Lord Jagannath is an unfinished form of Krishna, deity form, Nacha Vigraha, the deity form of the Lord. But actually this is not the case. The form of Lord Jagannath is an eternal form of Krishna. And there's a very nice explanation of this, of Lord Jagannath's form in the Puranas. And I'll just read from it. So after leaving Mathura, Lord Krishna resided in Dwaraka, along with his 16,108 wives. All of them were very beautiful and served the Lord with extreme love and care. Though the queens engaged in intense service to satisfy their divine husband, still Lord Krishna always meditated on Sri Vrindavan. He constantly remembered the residents of Braj, especially the Gopas and Gopis, the cowherd boys and cowherd girls. And he longingly recalled the pastimes he shared with them. Feeling separation from Vrindavan, sometimes Lord Krishna would seem indifferent to everything. This disturbed his wives immensely. The queens of Dwaraka thought, what is happening? Even if we serve the Lord so nicely, why does he always talk about and remember Vrindavan? The Lord frequently cried out in his sleep, Radhi, Radhi, Gopi, Gopi. The queens became curious to know about the Lord's pastimes in Vrindavan. What happened there that the Lord could not forget? But who can tell us the childhood pastimes of our beloved husband when he was a child living in Vrindavan? They came to know that Mother Rohini had witnessed the Vrindavan pastimes of the Lord, and that to their great fortune, she was staying in Dwarka. One day, all of the queens anxiously approached Rohini Mata and requested her to kindly tell them about the Lord's youth in Vrindavan. Mother Rohini understood that the queens were eager to hear about the Lord's Vraja Leela. She said, indeed, the Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna are very special, so special that Krishna also gets attracted by hearing their glories. I can describe these wonderful activities to you, but on one condition. Krishna and Balaram should not hear when I describe these pastimes. If they hear, it will be a big problem. One day when Krishna and Balaram had gone to attend a meeting in Sudama meeting hall, all of the queens eagerly took the opportunity of their absence. They all gathered in one big hall and requested Rohini Mata to narrate Krishna's childhood pastimes. To make sure that the brothers could not listen, Mother Rohini instructed Subhadra to serve as the doorkeeper. Subhadra would signal to Mother Rohini if Krishna and Balaram arrived on the scene. So Subhadra, of course, is Krishna's sister, the daughter of Vasudeva and Devaki. Now everything was ready. All of the queens gathered in great excitement. Subhadra stood at the gate and stretched her hand so that no one could enter inside, specifically Krishna and Balaram. Mother Rohini joyfully told the childhood pastimes of Krishna and Vrindavan. Rohini's descriptions were so pleasing and ecstatic. The queens heard with rapt attention. They were so absorbed in drinking the Amrita coming from the lips of Mother Rohini that all of them lost their external senses. Amrita is nectar. Subhadra, although officially engaged in guarding the gate, could not miss the opportunity to hear Lord Krishna's pastimes. Like the Dwarka queens, she lost her external senses. Although Krishna and Balaram were busy attending a meeting, they could understand that Mother Rohini was describing their Vrindavan Leelas. In overwhelming greed to hear the Katha, the brothers suddenly left the assembly hall and ran to the place where Rohini Devi and the queens were gathered. When they reached the door, they found Subhadra standing at the gate on security duty. Krishna and Balaram stood on both sides of Subhadra and instantly became absorbed in Mother Rohini's descriptions. Since Subhadra was fully engrossed in hearing and had lost her external senses, she did not perceive the presence of the lords. As the three became enraptured by hearing the pastimes, great transformations started to appear in their bodies. Oh, such nice pastimes. The Vrindavan pastimes tell of the love and attraction of the Vrajvasis. Lost in a state of wonder, their eyes became big and dilated, and their hands and legs disappeared inside their bodies. Their hands and legs shrunken, so Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra looked just like tortoises. At this time, Narada Muni came to that spot. From a far distance, he could see the three forms of Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra as he approached. Then Krishna, along with his brother and sister, came to their external senses. Their bodies manifested their normal forms. They wound up their Mahabhagavat, which had manifested their special forms. Narada Muni danced, with his arms raised in great bliss. I have seen it. I have seen it. You are trying to hide from me. My dear Lord, I have seen so many of your amazing transcendental forms, but I have never seen this beautiful form. I humbly pray that you manifest this most auspicious form somewhere so that everyone can take darshan of your most special Mahabhagavat Prakasha Rupa. To fulfill the desire of his devotee, Narada Muni, Lord Krishna manifested this form and eternally resides in Shri Kshetra, Purushottam Dham. So this is a description of the eternal form of Lord Krishna, Baladeva and Subhadra, and how they, in the hearing of their pastimes, their eyes became large and their limbs retracted within their body like a tortoise. And this is the form of Jagannatha, Baladeva and Subhadra. So these are not, the forms of Jagannatha, Baladeva and Subhadra are not unfinished deities. These are eternal, ever-existing forms of the Lord. So I just have a few minutes left. So, in the Krishna book, chapter 82, there is the description of how the residents of Vrindavan went to Kurukshetra to meet Krishna and Vasudeva and Devaki and the residents of Dwaraka at the time of a solar eclipse. And so this chapter in Krishna book, of course, is very nice description of the different interactions between the Yadus and Nanda Maharaj. And but Krishna took the opportunity to go off and speak with the gopis. And so I'll just read a little bit. So the gopis continued, "Dear Krishna, we are always busy in our family affairs. We therefore request that you remain within our hearts as the rising sun. That will be your greatest benediction. The gopis are always liberated souls because they are fully in Krishna consciousness. They only pretended to be entangled in household affairs in Vrindavan. Because of their separation from Krishna, he might have asked them to return with him to his capital city, Dwaraka. But the inhabitants of Vrindavan, the gopis, were not interested in the idea of going with Krishna to Dwaraka. They wanted to remain busy in Vrindavan and thus feel the presence of Krishna in every step of their lives. They immediately invited Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. This transcendental emotional existence of the gopis is the basic principle of Lord Chaitanya's teaching. The Ratha Yatra festival observed by Lord Chaitanya is the emotional process of taking Krishna back to Vrindavan. Srimati Radharani refused to go with Krishna to Dwaraka to enjoy his company in the atmosphere of royal opulence, for she wanted to enjoy his company in the original Vrindavan atmosphere. Lord Krishna, being profoundly attached to the gopis, never goes away from Vrindavan. So, the Ratha Yatra festival is Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. They leave the Jagannath temple and they go to the Gundicha temple and the gardens there. And so the worship of Lord Jagannath in the temple is like worship of Krishna in Dwaraka. Krishna is very worshipped in the mood of awe and reverence, not in the Vrindavan mood. Although, of course, the worship of Lord Jagannath is also very intimate and personal. Anyway, Lord Jagannath goes in the Ratha Yatra to the Gundicha temple, which is very much in the mood of Vrindavan. And he goes there to meet Srimati Radharani. And there's some very nice verse that Srila Rupa Goswami composed that Lord Chaitanya was very pleased with. This is in the Anchalila, chapter 1, text 114. My dear friend, now I have met my very old and dear friend Krishna on this field of Kurukshetra. I am the same Radharani, and now we are meeting together. It is very pleasant, but I would still like to go to the bank of the Jamuna, beneath the trees of the forest there. I wish to hear the vibration of his sweet flute playing the fifth note within that forest of Vrindavan. And so Swarup Damodar described very much how this had captured Lord Chaitanya's mood, his mood of separation, wanting to be with Krishna, in the mood of Srimati Radharani in Vrindavan. And this is the esoteric meaning of the Ratha Yatra. So anyway, so thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on the glories of Lord Jagannath. And I'll just chant for just 1 minute. Jagannath Swami, Nayana Pratagami.
Krishna much, Janadas, Sorada Dasi, and Murari Dasi, for the wonderful and sweet chanting you shared to us and your precious time.